What up, everybody? Sven Diesel here. Going to be tying up a woolly bugger. This is a wide-known pattern. It's not mine. It's modified 100 different ways. But let's go ahead and just tie it. This is me tying up a woolly bugger. This is going to be tied with just a brass bead. You can use tungsten. You can also use some lead wraps. But I've got one of my favorite hooks, a stealth hook. This is a size 10. I fish it from usually 8 to 12s, but we're going to be using a thread. I'm going to tie in some red thread that if I can get it on my bobbin here. This is Semperfli's new wax thread. It's in an 8/0, and get it back in. We'll get our thread started. Now I'm just keeping this as basic as I can. As mentioned, this is a brass bead. This is on a stealth hook. You can use tungsten. You can use extra lead wraps to get it down. But for the tail, I typically use Marabou. This is just some strung Marabou that I got out of a pack. And we're going to go ahead and trim out the stem to get rid of that stiffness of the feather. But we'll go ahead, and this is pretty thick. I like to keep my tails a little bit more sparse, but we'll go ahead and just get a little bit of here, and I've got a lot. This is kind of really uneven, but we'll go ahead and just, the ones that are a little bit longer, just pluck with your fingers. You want to get a little bit of a taper when it gets wet, so you got to think about that. But we're going to do this the length of about 1.5 times the shank of the hook. And so there we go. That looks pretty. So this is an olive. I have a lot of confidence in olive woolly buggers or leeches. They work really well out here for some still water fishing. I'd imagine you can also use it for rivers, but I typically fish a lot of still water. So to create a uniform body, I'm just going to go ahead and loosely wrap this Marabou all the way up behind the bead. I'll go ahead and trim out my excess and discard it. And now I'm going to clean up that body. It just makes it easier. But I guess you don't really need to tie the Marabou all the way up the shank, but I just, we're going to be putting a little super glue on this shank, and I just think it bonds everything together. So that looks really clean. We'll go ahead and move on to the next step. So I'm going to be tying in some crystal flash, 2 to 3 strands. No big deal. Just tie it in so that it's extending beyond the tail. Tie it in on my side, and then we're going to do the flying V. So I'm going to basically bring it straight up, tie one wrap over so it lays on the other side of the shank, and work my way back to the tail, pinching it so that it stays on these sides. And that is awesome. So I like to leave these bits of flash a little bit longer than the Marabou. So I just, once the Marabou drops out, cut it off, and then you're good to go. That looks sexy. So we will apply a little bit of glue as mentioned. I'm putting it really heavy back behind the bead here because I don't want that bead, moving down the shank, and it keeps it all together. So just apply a heavy load right there. This is Zap-A-Gap, but you can use super glue, Loctite gel. We're going to be ribbing this with some tippet. This is just some old tippet I had from previous seasons of fishing. This is a 6X. You can also use wire. Wire would also help add weight to the fly. Durability wise, wire might be stronger, fluorocarbon might be stronger. We're just using some 6X tippet. Really, we're just trying to counter rib this so that when a fish takes a couple hits on that the hackle we're going to be using, it doesn't come undone. And speaking of hackle, let's go ahead and pull out a feather that we're using. This is just some hackles, some grizzly olive to match, and I'm just going to go ahead and tie in the tip and just tie it right into that super glue. Just bond it all together. Doesn't need to be clean. Buggers are named buggers for a reason, but leave a little bit of a gap there, like 1/8 of an inch. It just helps to start wrap this or palmer this hackle around the shank. And we'll go ahead and make sure that's all secure. Work my way back to the bend where we're tying in, Now you can use, for the body, you can use chenilles, you can use whatever. We're going to be using eye stub. I think the eye stub keeps a little bit of a slender body, and we'll just go ahead and dub some onto our thread. Less is more. We'll start with a little bit just to make sure we start it correctly. That looks perfect. So let's pull out a little bit bigger of a clump, dub it on, and we'll just work our way up. This is where maybe a chenille's a little bit faster because you just tie it in and palmer it up. But I really been liking how this eye stub just looks under the hackle, and it allows us to really get it in real nice and good. But it doesn't need to be perfect. You could spend all the time in the world, but we're going to be palmering the hackle around it. We're going to be counter ribbing it with the tippet, and so it's going to look uniform in the end. But hopefully our super glue is just a little bit, that didn't go. We'll trap it. There we go. It's secure. Watch those noodles that they don't come undone, especially when filming, right? So let's go ahead and start palmering this this hackle. We'll work our way, give a nice little turn towards the back to, make sure we've got the whole shank covered, and then start wrapping forward and adjust those back a little bit. But basically you want about 1/8 of an inch gap, or just a 17/364 of an inch, and work your way up towards the bead. And when you get to the bead, let's do 2 maybe 3 full wraps right there behind the bead, just to create a little bit of a head or something to help push water a little bit more. Another variation you could do to this pattern is you could have tied in legs at the back, some rubber legs. You can tie in 1 or 2 at the back, 1 or 2 at the front, total of 6 legs. I've had a couple reservoirs where the legs were of great benefit, but this one generally does pretty good as is. So we secured the hackle off. Let's go ahead and counter rib this. So I want to make sure I go the opposite direction of the hackle. Now as you're counter ribbing this, all you got to do is just move the tippet, or if you're using wire, basically move it back and forth as I'm doing, and that helps to decrease the amount of hackle fibers you trap. We will brush it out after, but this just really helps in the process of minimizing the amount of trap fibers. The more you wiggle it, the better, but you don't want to, wiggle it so much you pop the hook out of your vise. But when you get to the front, do 2 full wraps. I found that with the tippet sometimes, when I brush it out, it can come out. And so ever since I started doing 2 full wraps around, it doesn't add a lot of bulk. It doesn't come undone. So this is why I used red as well. We create a little bit of a hot spot here. We'll go ahead and snip out our tippet, and I'll build up a little bit smoother of a hot spot, and we'll go ahead and do it and whip finish. So make sure not to trap any fibers as you're doing this, especially if you're going to be tying and posting these, but the bigger the better. We'll snip out our thread. I'm going to add a little bit of a loon flow to this to help secure that thread, make it a little bit more durable. And you can use head cement as well, or there's, I'm sure, many other products. And we'll go ahead and cure that for a good 10 seconds, counting down from 20, and it's cured. Make sure to look away at this point. But there we go. This one is good to go. We'll go ahead and just give it a little brush out just to make sure most of the fibers, I'm just using a little Velcro brush here, just be super aggressive on it, as hard as a fish would hit it. And this is also a good time to shape those fibers for those posts of these flies you do, and to make them super pretty. No, I'm kidding. But really, you're just trying to get any trap fibers out that you can. Maybe even add a little bit of that eye stub into the hackle fibers to create a little bit more bugginess or flow. But this bugger turned out real nice. The color combos are endless. Thanks for watching.